I'm Max Keiser, and this is the Keiser Report. The Decapitate Bankers Tour continues. We had a great show in Dublin, and now we move on to Amsterdam, and then possibly Sweden, and from there, Athens. Huge interest in Athens. If you want to send me an email about this, where we should come to your town, send it to Keiser Report at rttv.ru. Let's get all the latest shenanigans and criminal activity from Wall Street. Stacy Herbert, you're looking fine, girl.
Max, I see you're not looking so well. You're sounding very ill, but it must be because of the epic battle being waged on the global financial battlefield right now as we speak. On one side, of course, is the Silver Liberation Army, headed by Super Max.
Nice.
On the other side is JP Morgan, and led by Jihadi Jamie and Mujahid Masters. But as we know, all the precious metals prices have been soaring this week, and that's in my first headline, Max. Gold explodes on S&P downgrade warning. S&P, one of the three rating agencies, downgraded the outlook for U.S. debt. And in particular, S&P is looking at the fiscal risks we see for the U.S. include the potential for further extraordinary official assistance to large players in the U.S. financial or other sectors, along with outlays related to various federal credit programs. So in particular, they point out that Fannie and Freddie, they believe, will need another 3.5% of GDP on top of the 1% of GDP that has already gone to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Let me get this straight. Barack Obama comes into office. Hank Paulson goes to Congress, puts a gun to their head, says, give us $750 billion to solve the structural damage to the banking system. Obama does that, comes through with TARP, then TALF, and other programs. They take Fannie Mae, $5 trillion of debt. They put it on the U.S. government's balance sheet. That means that the U.S. government's got $18 trillion of debt. They've raised the debt ceiling by $2 trillion, and they're going to raise it again by another $5 to $12 trillion. And at this juncture, the net total sum of all of this bailout money and money printing to help the creditors has amounted to zero. They are in as bad a shape as they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago as today. There's no difference. All they did was take that money and pocket it as a bonus, and they left this rotting carcass as a shell. Barack Obama could have come into office, wiped clean every mortgage debt in the country and every credit card debt in the country for about $13 trillion, and the country would be growing, the mortgage crisis would be behind it, and the creditors would have all gone bankrupt, but we would have had 5 or 6 new banks taking their place, making loans, operating as a utility instead of a casino, and we're going like bank gusters into the future. Instead, we're exactly where we were 3 years ago. There hasn't been one iota of progress.
Well, Max, in fact, you're wrong there, according to what the S&P is saying. We've gone backwards, according to them. They say, quote, more importantly, we believe the risks from the U.S. financial sector are higher than we considered them to be before 2008.
Because they loaded onto the balance sheet tens of trillions more in debt. And then that's debt, that means debt service that has to come out of the income of the American taxpayer. Right now, 25% of the taxes that America pays to the government are paying the interest on the debt, the implied rate. That's going to 75%. Within 5 years, 100% of every tax dollar collected by the federal government will go to paying the interest on the debt. Now, that's a failed economy. That's a failed currency. Gold and silver are saying the U.S. dollar is a failed currency. They want to get out of it. They want to dump it. And it's dying. And I say good riddance.
Well, remember as Greece and Portugal and Spain were being downgraded similarly by S&P and Fitch and Moody's, and it was the credit default swap, the CDS, that was the indicator to the global markets that the debt of these countries was being attacked? Well, Zero Hedge tweeted something very interesting about the gold price soaring. Gold is the new U.S. CDS.
Right, it has been for 10 years. And gold started to make its move in 2000 when the internet bubble burst. and the Fed came in with lower interest rates to feed the housing bubble. This is when the gold and silver vigilantes understood that Ben Bernanke and Greenspan were not operating in the interest of the greater economic good, but only in the very narrow interest of the top 0.1% in the United States, who, by the way, they just got another huge tax cut. They just got another huge wealth increase, and the divide between the top 0.1% and the bottom 99 and so percent has gotten even wider.
Well, if gold is the new U.S. CDS, the insurance against U.S. default, well then Texas is going full-on secessionist, Max, in this next headline. Texas University takes cue from Kyle Bass to hold $1 billion in gold bars. So the University of Texas has the second largest endowment fund of any U.S. university, the number one being Harvard. They have $19.9 billion in their fund. And last year they added another $500 million in gold holdings to their already $500 million worth. And they took physical delivery. It's being held at HSBC in New York. It's physical gold they took. They didn't take GLD or any of these ETFs or paper gold.
No, and who are the Bass family? The Bass family, they are super wealthy. They've been riding the bull for decades. They've been riding the takeout bull, the leveraged buyout bull, all the rallies that we've seen in stocks, bonds, over the past 30 years. You know, the Bass family has amassed a huge fortune playing the game. Now they realize that the game now is gold. Now, what's significant is that up until recently, no institutional players have stepped into the gold market. There's no big university endowment fund, no big pension fund. This is the first shot across the bow. Now all these endowment funds to compete are going to have to start buying gold bullion as well. This is phase 2 of the gold bull market. We're out of phase 1. It went from $250 to $1,500. Now we're in phase 2. It makes a move from $1,500 to $6,000-$7,000 an ounce. Then we'll get into phase 3, and it becomes a mania, and who knows, 10, 15, 20,000. It's hard to say where the mania top will be. But now we're clearly at the beginning of phase 2. Silver, however, is still in phase 1. It hasn't even entered phase 2 at this $42, $43 level. I don't think it'll get into phase 2, and it'll break out of the old Hunt Brothers high of $50 an ounce. Then you'll see a shot to 75. Then we'll be in phase 2, and you got a clear shot to 350.
Well, Kyle Bass's comment on why he recommended the University of Texas buy gold was that, quote, central banks are printing more money than they ever have. So what's the value of money in terms of purchases of goods and services? I look at gold as just another currency that they can't print any more of.
Duh. Right. I mean, it's a currency risk. I mean, and gold and silver are a currency. That's the key concept in that phrase. In other words, it's not a commodity. It's not speculation. It's a currency. It's been out of favor for 20 years. Now suddenly it's coming back, and it's reasserting itself as the store of value that it has been for 5,000 frickin' years. Since the 40 years of paper money experimentation after the collapse of the gold standard in 1971 is over, and as Mark Faber has said, you still got 70-80% of the big players around the world are heavily invested in dollars. So even though the euro looks kind of weak, not many folks really own the euro compared to the dollar. The dollar is really the piñata that's going to get whacked and whacked and whacked again, and driving gold and silver to ungodly measures of price appreciation. I get so excited when I think of it. I actually have a transcendental experience. I can see the silver and gold gods now hovering above, beckoning me to the four-place level of 6,000, 7,000. I see you, gold gods. I'm coming to you, gold gods. The price is appreciating, gold gods.
Max, many people don't realize that you are also, as well as being the general of the Silver Liberation Army, that you are also a pinup.
What?
I found the photo, the poster, the proof, the evidence that you're the pinup girl.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, those are my disco days. No, but clearly, judging by this photo, obviously I have nicer legs than Blythe Masters. Now that's clear. So not only is she a CDS terrorist concocting financials of mass financial destruction, but she's got hairy, short, little stubby legs. I wouldn't go near that with...
So again, gold and silver are a CDS against U.S. default.
Yeah.
Now, here's another reason to buy gold and silver to protect, because there's no sign that the U.S. is going to fix itself. Headline reads, Republicans will make U.S. third world nation, Obama. So Obama said to a fundraiser in Chicago, under their vision, meaning the Republicans, we can't invest in roads and bridges and broadband and high-speed rail.
No.
I mean, we would be a nation of potholes, and our airports would be worse than places that we thought that we used to call the third world, but who are now investing in infrastructure. Apparently, he's never been out of the U.S. He doesn't realize it's third world. It's already filled with potholes and dilapidated airports.
Well, they live in this snow globe of delusion. They never travel outside of the U.S. They go to Disneyland instead. They think the Eiffel Tower is something you see in Las Vegas. They are without any worldly view whatsoever, which is the byproduct of having the world reserve currency for 60 years after World War II. You don't have any global vision. There's no leadership. Obama, I think he's probably the worst American president in the history of American presidents because he's so narrow-minded. He's so uninformed. He's never been outside of
well, he has been. He grew up in Indonesia, for example. But the point is, it doesn't matter. It's Obama or Bush. He was just as stupid. They're just as idiotic as each other. Because the fact is that it's not just investing in rail systems and infrastructure. That is part and parcel of having an economy that can function. But first you need an economy, and you need to get rid of those bankers. As the S&P didn't say, the outlook for the U.S. debt is negative because they don't have an infrastructure system, a dilapidated system and potholes. They said it because the banks are still too strong. They're more dangerous than they were pre-2008. That's why his statement is idiotic.
Okay, so the infrastructure of the banking system is dilapidated.
The banking infrastructure, yes.
Is dilapidated.
Yes.
But they refuse to fix it.
Yes.
But they throw money at it.
Yes.
And it spurts out in odd places because it's all broken. The plumbing is broken. If you have a water main break, the water will come out in somebody's house, one guy's house here, and it'll flood somebody else. It's a complete breakdown of plumbing. The system is dilapidated. It's broken. The Fed just keeps printing money. So if you're a rich person, they've got it hooked up so the money comes gushing out of your sink. But if you're a poor person, you go into destitution. I mean, it's rigged and broken in favoring the current kleptocracy, which is a fantastic system if you're running a kleptocracy. But yeah, I mean, Obama, obviously, what I'm referring to is worldly view. I'm talking post-lobotomy. Clearly, before the lobotomy, yes, he had some world traveling experience. But then post-lobotomy, he is a dunderhead. All right, so I think that does it for now. Now, you promised chicken soup later.
I did, Max. I did, as long as you put back on your pinup outfit.
That sounds good. Tasty indeed. Well, don't go away. Much more coming your way. So, hey, why not stick around?
Welcome to the future, bringing you the latest in science and technology from around Russia.
We've got the future covered.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to Washington, D.C. and talk with Talkie Aldman, director of the Billionaires Tea Party, a film that will be airing soon on RT. Thanks for coming on the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much.
All right, Talkie Aldman, who are the billionaires behind the Tea Party and what do they want?
My film primarily looks at two billionaires who are the Koch brothers, Charles and David Koch. They're primarily an oil refining conglomerates through their company, Koch Industries. They're the third and fourth richest people in America now, and their company is considered the second largest private company in the country. So they're very, very wealthy people. What they want is basically to create a privatized America. They're what they call free market capitalists. They're highly ideological, and they're basically trying to get government out of the way so people like them can pretty much do business in any way they choose.
You're right, so they want to do a takeover of America, and they're doing this by creating this Tea Party movement, basically. And it's quite remarkable, right? Because the Tea Party, folks who follow it, seems to be arguing and protesting and demonstrating against their own interests. Tell us about what is happening in Wisconsin and the Koch brothers' role there. What is their role in Governor Walker's agenda? How do the brothers benefit from what he is pushing?
Before we go to that, it is an important point that you mentioned before, which is people going against their own interests. Because, I mean, the big thing here is that if you say what I just said to a Tea Partier, they'll say, well, no one's funding me. I don't see any billionaires behind me. What it is, it's a kind of a two-step process. It's basically a propaganda campaign through a series of front groups funded by the Kochs, corporate players and other wealthy billionaires. Their names, such as Freedom Works and Americans for Prosperity, have basically come in and set the talking points and organised a lot of these Tea Party rallies. So that's the way it's worked. And if you look at what's happened in Wisconsin, it's a lot of the same thing. The thing that got the most press was Governor Walker, and the connection to the Kochs, I should say, was Governor Walker had been given an amount of money by the Kochs, and in relation to the campaign finance, it was fairly high. Like, it was the second or third highest or something like that. But it was in the tens of thousands. It wasn't a lot of money. Where the real influence, primarily to get Walker elected, but then subsequently to try and support his approach to bust the unions, was through these front groups that I'm talking about, and in particular Americans for Prosperity. They ran a lot of ads during the 2010 elections for Governor Walker, and they've also been running a lot of ads in favour of his reforms. They also were primary organisers of the various rallies that were out to support what Walker was doing. And so really it's through these front groups that look like citizens groups, and in fact do have citizens involved, but not realising in many ways who they're actually supporting, that the Kochs have been exerting influence.
When I hear these Tea Partiers on television and I hear right-wing pundits and GOP pundits, they always lead their attacks with the government. The government is this, the government is that, and yet the government is the people. And what they're talking about is replacing government with corporations. And corporations
Exactly.
are clearly are clearly not in the interest of the people or the public domain or the Commonwealth or the Republic. There's always been this tension between the privatization of the assets of the country and free market enterprise that should benefit a majority of the country. So why are the Tea Partiers so stupid, I guess is the question. Well, how come they don't see that they're being used like, chum to fish for sharks?
This is the big question, isn't it? I mean, when I said before that there was a propaganda campaign, it's exactly that. It's you have people whose ideology is basically that private enterprise should control everything. So there should be no such thing as government funding of schools, there should be no unions, there should be no any sort of social safety net, there should be no environmental regulations, no food, no drug regulations. I mean, basically they have this utopian vision, if you will, that somehow if we just let private enterprise run the world, then it's going to create this beautiful equilibrium that is perfectly in balance with human beings' natural state, and that somehow government is interfering in the market and things like wealth redistribution are not a good thing. Now, obviously, you can't just go ahead and straight out say that stuff because it's not very popular. It's really going to benefit the very wealthy people. So this is where the propaganda campaign comes in. So I don't look at it as Tea Parties being stupid, so much as there has been a very effective propaganda campaign to wrap these messages up in the American flag, to basically tie these messages in with the Founding Fathers, to tie them in with the Constitution, and to demonise big government, I should say, and to demonise Barack Obama as a socialist. So you've got the dual aspects of propaganda, which is one, you wrap your thing up in something that people care about and love. In this case, it's nationalism and national pride. And you also demonise your opponents in things that people will have a negative reaction to. In this case, it's socialism and big government trying to take control of individuals' lives, which if there's one thing an American hates, it's the thought of their freedoms being taken away.
Right. Now, you mentioned wealth redistribution, and coming out this week from Hollywood is the film version of When Atlas Shrugged, the book written by Ayn
Yes.
Rand, who has been quoted often by stalwarts such as Alan Greenspan and the whole private market, private equity, hedge fund community, the top 0.1% as exemplary of the attitude that they want to espouse. And yet, this idea of wealth redistribution is a misnomer, because the only wealth we're seeing redistributed is the wealth from the Commonwealth to the top 1%. I mean, that's the wealth redistribution. Now, the Tea Party says we're against wealth redistribution, and yet they're funded by the biggest wealth redistributors in the country, the Koch brothers, who vacuum the wealth using market manipulation, insider trading, favorism in Washington, there's a kleptocracy. They do everything except open up a gas chamber and start gassing people. So why, again, in America, are people so freaking stupid?
What the philosophy of Ayn Rand's, her book, The Virtue of Selfishness, kind of epitomizes the philosophy there, which was basically that if everybody is out there working in their own interests rather than having any form of altruism, then somehow society will create this, as I said before, this equilibrium. Now, the irony is that while the Kochs and other people, but let's talk about the Kochs for a minute, have poured millions and millions of hundreds of millions of dollars into these free market movement, this idea of getting government out of the way as a philosophical issue, as an ideological issue. They're some of the worst practitioners of crony capitalism around. In practice, it's got nothing to do with this thing of just opening up the market to a level playing field. As you said, I mean, let's look at the climate example. Rather than accepting that most scientists say that climate change is real, and therefore let's let what methods can be done to try and alleviate that, and different technologies can rise to the surface. Basically what they're doing is trying to artificially maintain the position of the oil industry. It's got nothing to do with free market capitalism, and it's got everything to do with crony capitalism, and therefore the whole point of crony capitalism is let's just keep the money in the hands of the wealthier citizens.
Right. At the core of free market capitalism is a concept called competition. So if the government, the people's house, decides they want to bring about something called the public option, that means they're bringing about competition in that industry. If the people's house in Washington decides they want to fund alternative energy and alternative forms of mechanization and engine development, that's competition. If the People's House say they want to roll back patents on drugs, that's pro-competition. And if these big corporations go out of business, then 5 or 10 or 15 take their place, that creates more jobs. So it's a pro-competition, pro-jobs platform to get rid of the monopolists, get rid of the crony capitalists, get rid of the kleptocrats. I would think that Americans would want to have jobs, and they would want to have savings, and they would want to have, and not be the laughing stock of the world by having a couple of Koch idiots using them like, real freaking jackasses. But anyway, let's move on. I gotta get off my soapbox here. Let's talk about the AstroTurf, the Koch AstroTurf groups. They genuinely think they are grassroots, right? Talk about how this nonsensical AstroTurfing dupes people into voting against their self-interest.
To look at sort of how that arose with the Kochs, it's useful to look back in 1980 when David Koch actually stood for vice president of the Libertarian Party. Now this is where you get an insight into a lot of those policies that I mentioned before about getting rid of the social safety net, etc., were stated in their policy platforms. Now they got less than 1% of the vote, because the reality is people don't really want those things. They're great for the wealthiest people, but for the rest of us, they're really not that great. And so what they instead did is in about 1984, they founded a group called Citizens for a Sound Economy. Now, Citizens for a Sound Economy, the whole purpose of this was to basically filter this message through what looked like a grassroots group. So it basically had the impression that people themselves were espousing these particular ideals, when in fact it was paid operatives of the Kochs. And so what they did is by associating free markets with freedom, by never revealing that people like the tobacco industry or the oil industry or the banking industry were pouring money into these groups and running what they call pay-for-play campaigns, where, for example, they'd come out and say, well, tobacco taxes are an example of big government gone crazy. Well, they never told their people, the supporters, a growing supporter base, that in fact that Philip Morris happened to be pouring a couple of $100,000 into this particular campaign. And so over the years, it grew and grew and grew with campaign after campaign after campaign.
All right, we've got about 30 seconds left or so. Let me ask you this question. Over there in Italy, I don't know if you follow the politics much, but Silvio Berlusconi has been caught up in a scandal. Apparently he has these semi-annual auditions where girls come to his place, and he puts them through their paces, and then the girls that are willing to have sex with him at the end of this process in some degrading manner are given jobs as TV presenters. Does this explain Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin?
I'm going to have to leave that one to you, I reckon.
Okay. I see David Koch and I see Silvio Berlusconi. And I see these shiksas who are running in the Tea Party, and I'm thinking, well, they're both kind of media whores. I guess it fits. All right, you've got a film coming out. It's called The Billionaire's Tea Party. It's going to be on RT. Tacky Ullman, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
My pleasure. And if anyone wants to check out, it's facebook.com Billionaires Tea Party. Come and check it out. Thank you very much, Max.
All right, super. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert, who's making me some chicken soup as we speak. And I want to thank my guest, Tacky Ullman. If you want to send me an email, please do so at KeiserReport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.